for joining me for the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howie Jacobson. Hey, just a quick introduction to all you listeners out there. This would be a good episode to watch because it is all about how to get better at presenting yourself on Zoom and other audiovisual digital platforms. I had this conversation largely because I wanted to get better at it myself, since I do a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom interviews, coaching on Zoom, and I wanted to see if there were things that I could do to be more effective, to be easier on people's eyes, so there was less Zoom fatigue from sort of watching my camera at a bad angle or the wrong exposure or lighting or whatever. And also because so many of us these days, especially if we want to do any sort of advocacy, if we want to be influential, if we want to have impact, people have to be, willing to watch and listen. And I learned a lot of things from this conversation, and I expect you will as well, from my guest, Alfred, who is a technologist. He's into health technology and also an expert at using video to get one's message across. So again, if you are only listening to this, and by only, I don't mean only, I mean I'm very happy that you're listening, but if you also like to watch to see what we're talking about in terms of the visuals of a good Zoom setup, then you'll want to go to plantyourself.com/497, and the YouTube video is embedded right slapdash at the top. All right, let's get to it without further ado. Alfred, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to be talking to you. So a lot of people listen to this on audio, and not that many people watch the video, but today we're going to be talking about video, right? About how to present yourself and how to communicate in this online world. So I will, in the show notes, have a link to the YouTube, assuming this all records well, so people can actually see our beautiful backgrounds and anything else that turns out to be relevant. But first, before we get into it, tell us a little bit about yourself and why folks should listen to you.
Sure. So I bill myself as the health tech futurist. I'm focused on health technology right now. In most of my dealings, I had edited an industry newsletter about and website about wearable and mobile technologies for health and medical. But my technology background goes way back. I wrote for PC Magazine for more than 20 years. And after that, I was an expert in display technology, particularly in televisions, as we switched from analog to digital broadcasts. People were confused about that. And now the health tech. Basically, I've made my career out of explaining stuff to people, primarily technology, and explaining it in ways that they can use. So, it's not so much the topic dependent as that skill of being able to understand the complexity of these things and trying to boil it down so that people have things that they can take action on and be effective with.
Ooh, well, I suddenly had the urge to hijack part of the conversation to talk about wearables.
Sure.
This is I'm 36 hours into my Whoop, my first ever.
There you go. Okay.
Wearable.
Excellent.
Other than a Garmin watch for running. So you can maybe take a detour there, but let's start with the promise, which is helping people be more effective in presenting online and specifically using video. So why is this even important?
So last year, about March or so, a number of the speaker communities that I'm a part of, I kept seeing the same thing get posted. Somebody said, well, I just got the call. My last event for all of 2020 has been canceled. I'm just going to sit back and wait for 2021 to come around. This year's done. And for me, they were missing a point, an opportunity, but also something more fundamental than that. And that is that, people talk about virtual events versus real events, which I don't think is the right term. I think the right terms are on-site or online because they're all real. They're all in person. They're all live. It's just the venue, the mechanism is different. And the pandemic obviously forced us into far too many Zoom meetings and couldn't travel, and it changed the way people did business. And obviously when you have a rapid inflection point like that, people aren't necessarily prepared for it. And that was especially true for speakers. I'm talking about professional speakers, but they were prepared to speak on stage, and they had their skills and craft down, but that didn't translate necessarily to virtual, which is too bad, because with virtual, you don't have to get on an airplane and go someplace and stay in a hotel a couple of nights to talk for an hour. And it opens up all kinds of possibilities. One of the things that event organizers have discovered is that some events are getting 2, 3, even 10 times as many participants when they hold a virtual event, an online event, than when they held it in person. And so, for anyone who speaks to others, as a speaker, as an industry thought leader, as a business owner or executive, even as managers or salespeople, if part of your job is reaching out and connecting with people and sharing information, you're cutting off a whole lot of opportunity if you're not ready to do a good job with a camera, as opposed to being at a lectern on a stage or in the front of a meeting room. And so that's how this all got started. Obviously, I've got had technical background that goes way back. I've been doing online events for over 8 years, doing them for myself as a paid speaker for other people's online events. I've produced summits. This past year, I produced a whole series of online trade shows for consumer electronic companies. So this wasn't brand new to me. I wasn't jumping on a bandwagon. But so I had some things that I could share. And so I really wanted to encourage people to start wherever they are, but be better at it.
Mm-hmm. So the bulk of the people watching and listening to this are not professional speakers. They're just sort of ordinary people. Either they have jobs in which they've been Zoomed instead of real meetings, or a lot of folks are activists of one sort or another, or teachers who, is what you're talking about also applicable sort of across the board for any of us who have a computer and a camera?
Absolutely. And I think that the professional speakers are the ones who are kind of aware of this, but I think the rest of the population and the audience that you've just described tends to think, oh, well, that's one more thing I have to learn a lot about, that I have to spend a lot of time on that. I got to spend a lot of money on that. I'll just do good enough and let it go at that. And it's a shame, because it's a missed opportunity. Whenever you have an inflection in an industry, there's that window where you can have a competitive advantage by being better, but that evaporates quickly. And very soon you need to be better just to stay even with everybody else. And we're going to get to that point fairly quickly when it comes to having online conversations, whether it's one-to-one or addressing a group of people. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite points is people talk about Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that Zoom fatigue exists. I think it's a made up term. What I think there is bad Zoom fatigue, just like there's bad meeting fatigue. And we both, I'm sure, have been sitting through meetings around a conference table someplace, just staring at the ceiling saying, when will this end? And it's not because you were in the meeting room. It's because the meeting wasn't well organized. It wasn't, it wasn't orchestrated effectively. It didn't engage the participants, whatever the point was. So it's not Zoom fatigue. It's bad Zoom fatigue. And my belief is that if you can stand out as being better at Zoom, then that's going to be a competitive advantage for you.
So you mentioned that the pandemic has sort of been an inflection point, which sounds like you think we're not going back. Like when, Delta is cured, everybody's vaccinated, something else happens, and we're all like, it's in the rearview mirror. we're still going to be living in a much more online meeting-ish, online event-ish sort of world?
We will go back to on-site meetings. We will go back to having, people gathering in small rooms, big rooms, ballrooms. And I don't doubt that. The difference is that we're not going to go all the way back to the way it was. And the reason for that is meeting planners, company executives, everybody involved in all these processes, they've already had a taste of the apple. They know how much time it saves. They know how much money it saves in terms of people not being out of the office or travel expenses or all those kinds of things that add up. There was a fascinating interview with I believe it was the CEO of Tata, which is the giant conglomerate in India.
The truck company?
Goes across all the industries. They make cars and steel and everything. And early on in the pandemic, he said, I used to think that to make a deal, I would have to get on a plane and go someplace for a week. And it would take 2 or 3 trips like that to close a deal. He said, I just closed a $500 million deal with 3 video calls, and I never had to leave my office. And so that's just one tiny example. It's expensive for him to go away for that long. So, that's just one tiny example of the benefits of online. And the reason I think people are hesitant to do it is because, again, they're not confident in it, how to do it. They feel that they aren't as engaging. There's a number of things about the experience that's not as satisfying as it would be if they were in the face-to-face in the same room. And my point is that that's true for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be true. There are things you can do to engage more effectively across the ether.
So my first inkling of that was a friend's son's bar mitzvah, where you'd go to first of all, I wouldn't have gone because it wasn't near me. So now I was there, and they used technology. They had they invited people to write blessings that then got turned into this word cloud that everybody could see. What are the key words that we're wishing for this child? It's there are before that point, I was just thinking of all the downsides. We're all disembodied. We can't feel and smell each other's energy. There's no sort of sidebar conversations. And for the first time I thought, that's all true. And there might be some compensatory technologies that we could use in a different way, so that it's not that it's going to ever replace a communal ritual, but it can be something else.
Yeah. And it's, if you try, the big mistake that a lot of people make is they try to replicate that on-site in-person experience online. And, and that's like saying, okay, I don't have a pickup truck. I've got a minivan, but I need to go haul stuff to my construction site. So how do I make the minivan look like a pickup truck? Well, it doesn't, and so you need to do the things that minivans are good for and not try to do the things that pickup trucks are good for.
That's a great analogy, because we used to haul. We moved to a farm, and I had a minivan, and we were hauling bales of hay, and twice a week I was vacuuming the minivan. Then I got a pickup truck with a plastic bed liner. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much easier.
Yeah, and yet there are things, if you would need to haul 5 or 6 kids to a soccer game and it's raining, chances are the pickup truck's not going to be very good.
Right. Kids wouldn't mind, but
right.
It's probably against the law.
Probably. Well, yeah, it is now. Back in the day, we used to ride the back of pickup trucks all the time, but that's it.
Right.
That's another time and place.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of want to talk about, so what are the what are the pickup truck, or the pickup truck qualities of online, whether it's a big event or just you and me talking, or a small group meeting, or somebody recording something for a LinkedIn Live or a YouTube show, like, okay, so if we can't be there in person, then well, how do we think about that? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to replicate? And what are we trying to do differently?
Exactly. And so for me, well, first of all, if you're going to an event as a speaker, or you're going to some meeting in a either internal or external, there's going to be a conference room set up or something like that. The first thing is that for those kind of events where you're there in person, somebody else is taking care of everything for you. Somebody else turned the room lights on. There's a microphone set up. Somebody's already hooked up the microphone and put it in the sound system and gotten all the levels right. If there's a stage, somebody's already dressed the stage and all those things. So the first thing to come to grips with is that nobody's going to do that for you when you're in your office. Either your office in a building, or if you're in a home office, you're going to have to cope with all those things yourself. And so for me, you start ticking down the hierarchy of the factors that are most important. And so for me, number one, without a doubt, is sound. People will put up with just about anything, so long as they can hear what you're saying and it's clear, and the volume level is up, and you've got good sound quality. If you sound like an old AM radio in a 57 Ford, people are going to get very tired of that very quickly, and they're going to click away. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people say, well, what do I do about that? Well, there's a lot of things you can do without having to go full sound studio. Simply buying you can get a really top quality microphone like the one I'm using right now for under $100. And that can make just an enormous difference over the sound that you might get from your webcam or from your laptop computer.
Is that a Blue Yeti?
This is a Blue Yeti that I'm using.
Okay.
Now, in typical fashion, I've amped it up a little bit. I like to work at a standing desk when I'm talking and we're having a video conference. I work at a standing desk all the time. There's no chairs in my office anywhere. One of the problems is that the Yeti comes with a desk stand, which is nice, but if you tap your desk, that vibration comes through. And so if you're typing anything, all that sound will come through the mic. So I've actually mounted it on a boom stand with a shock mount. That it does add to the cost, but probably less than $50 to add that.
And when I started out in podcasting, when I decided I was going to get real about it, I bought an ATR 2100 dynamic mic. It was under $50 at the time. It's probably between 50 and 100 now. And there's an entire online industry to kind of write reviews to get you to buy things off of their links. And honestly, I've upgraded a couple of times since that mic, and I can't even hear the difference. Mm-hmm. For $30, you can get enough quality that no one but an orchestra conductor or an audiophile is going to hear that you aren't right there in the room with them.
And that's a really good point. We're both musicians, I know. And I play mandolin, and people always ask me, what mandolin should I get? I want to get started. And my advice is buy the lowest priced mandolin that you can stand to play. Right? Make the minimum viable investment and work with that until you find that it's not doing what you want to do. You can't make the sounds that you want to make. You can't play the kinds of things you want to play on it. Then you know what you need. So then go look for the lowest price instrument that will let you do that and upgrade to that one. But don't start off with a $3,000 or $4,000 custom built instrument, because you may not need that. And it's the same with microphones. start with, a minimally viable solution and work with it until you start hearing, oh, that doesn't sound as good as I want. It doesn't have the sound qualities that I want. And there's a lot to know about it. There's dynamic versus condenser mics. There's, a lot USB versus going into a soundboard that you can then adjust the sound levels on and so forth. So you can definitely go up and up, beyond that minimal viable solution. But my advice is, start at the bottom and then work up as you hear the need. Now, I will say that a lot of stuff that sounds okay through your laptop speakers or your desktop speakers or on your phone, and you start listening to those through headphones, as I'm sure you do, especially if you're editing. I hear the difference. I hear a lot of difference. I mean, there's a lot of things about my sound that I don't like the way it is now, and I'm working to fix that. But but I think what I have now is good enough.
Right. And I mean, the other thing that I would say is that when you get a mic, learn your mic.
Yes.
Right. Because I mean, this is true of speakers at public meetings as well, that people, I'm like 3.5 inches away from my condenser mic. If I turn my head to the side, all of a sudden it gets a lot quieter.
Yep.
And people don't, when you're speaking, you get animated and you forget that you have your primary relationship is with this microphone.
And I'd also point out that you're speaking over the top of your mic. A lot of people get down here and speak straight into their mic, which for a condenser mic doesn't give you the best sound usually.
You mean, however, I'm doing it right?
You're doing it absolutely right.
Oh, good.
But if you were using a dynamic mic, like a Shure 58, which is the SM58, which is the gold standard for every garage band ever. For that, it has what's called a proximity effect. So first of all, it's very directional. So you want to be speaking straight into it. But the other thing, as you get closer and closer to it, you get that rich baritone kind of sound out of it that just, sounds gorgeous. But you back off 3 inches from that and you lose it. So, So you really need to experiment. This is where GarageBand or Audacity is your friend, because you just fire that up and talk into it and experiment and see what happens when you use different settings and change your position and all that. And using headphones, you'll really be able to hear the difference and see which kind of sound you really want.
Right. And the way I've done that is with, my co-author, Peter Bregman. Like most of the time we discuss like important things, but sometimes we'll just get on a Zoom call. Like he got this mic and like we spend 10 minutes where he's just talking and moving back and forth. And is it better here? Am I better here?
Yep.
Is it better with the pop filter on or off?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can get somebody else to tell you before you have to do it for money.
Absolutely. And that's a really key thing. Boy, I have just recently, I attended a live webinar by an expert, and it was, in my opinion, I mean, the content was pretty good, but the production was a disaster. They didn't have a pop filter. They were too close to the mic. They were popping their P's and T's, and I was just so distracted by all those kinds of problems that I'd had a real hard time paying attention to the content, which again is why you want to be that incremental step better than the other guy, because you've got that much of an edge in being able to get your point across and then making it stick.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So just, I'm going to take advantage of this for personal consulting. So I have the pop filter, but I don't keep it on because it visually it takes up more room. Do you think it's necessary with me talking over the top of it?
I haven't noticed any pops. And so
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Yeah, it sounds perfect.
Okay.
At this point, I have a windscreen and a pop filter on mine. May not need them, but this way I don't have to worry about it. My goal is to get rid of the mic altogether. My goal is to go to a lavalier mic. And I've got a bunch here that are pretty good. The problem is that I need to do some sound treatments to my room because I've got an angled ceiling here, a hard wall behind me, a hard ceiling overhead. And so I'm getting a lot of room noise with it. The thing about condenser mics is they tend not to pick that up as much as you might get with a dynamic mic. So lavalier mics are dynamic. And so they are more omni and tend to pick all that up more. So until I can get some dampening panels, which I've built and are sitting right here waiting to go up, till I can get some of them up to soften the room a bit, I'm going to be stuck using a big mic. But on the other hand, for some people, for some situations, it looks sexy. It's a big pro mic, right. And people think you know what you're doing because you've got a big hunk of hardware.
Right. I know when I'm doing interviews with people and I first get on, they feel very relieved. Like, okay, he's got a mic.
Right.
He's not using his webcam.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So what else do people, sorry, before we go on to the video, anything else people need to know about audio that would be different that you would teach a public speaker, like in terms of enunciation or breathing or pacing?
No, it's pretty much the same. When you're recording, especially with podcasts, and I'm sure you know that, you often get the inhale, and it shows up. I edit my podcast because I keep mine are nice and short and I can spend the time doing it. But I go out and I silence a lot of the inhales, not all of them, because I like it to sound natural and stuff. But it can be distracting. You can have the same problem on stage. It's just less likely to have that on stage. And also, if it's audio only, you tend to hear things like that more when you just when you're watching a video, you don't hear it so much because you've got all the other visual cues going on. But for audio only, those deep inhales are can be distracting.
Well, when Peter and I did our media training before we started on the promotion train, the trainer asked me, "How come you make a clicking sound every time you speak?"
Yep.
Right. So, and then I started hearing it, and it was driving me crazy.
It is a learned behavior. It is very common. And once you are sensitive to it, you'll hear it all over the place. And I don't know why we do it, but it's just this sort of reflexive tongue click that we do. And I know that I do it sometimes. It almost never happens while you're talking. It's always just before you start talking. And that's when people do it.
Right.
It's not the that fills in the middle of a thing. It's that sort of trigger before you start talking, and you can learn not to do it, but it's totally natural.
I'm working on it. So you're about to talk about the webcam. So we're going to move to video.
So the next level in the hierarchy is the image. So first of all, they've got to hear you and not have to work hard to hear you. Second one is if you're doing video, same thing holds. You don't want them to have to work hard to hear you, to see you. And because that's really the most engaging part. If you're listening to just audio, it could be a recording. There's not that much liveness to it. You can't, but when it's a video, you've got the eye contact, you've got the engagement, you've got motions to, gestures to emphasize your points. So all that adds up and makes it more natural and more engaging. Anything that gets in the way of that can be a problem because again, it's going to be tiring for them to watch you. So one of the easy points, one of the big points that I make is that almost everything we've been taught about speaking on stage is wrong. when it comes to camera, because, stage, you're supposed to be big gestures, walk over here, make your point, come back over here, anchor yourself, make a point, all that kinds of stuff. That doesn't work on camera. So what I encourage people to do is don't watch stage performances, watch television performances. Go to your favorite news channel and how do they act? And you'll see they sit very still. They'll use their hands to gesture from time to time, but for the most part, they're standing very still and not moving around and making the audience seasick. So there are things like that. But again, if it's hard to see you, they're going to get tired of that. They're going to look away. And one of the big things there is the lighting. So you want to, as I tell people, a lot of people know not to sit in front of a bright window, because then you're all in shade and people won't be able to see your face, and it doesn't go over so well. So having, bright diffused light in front of you is a much better thing.
How's my lighting?
I'm sorry?
How's my lighting?
Your lighting is good. One thing that's really good about your lighting is that you have a little more light on one side than the other. And that's provides some dynamic range to your face and makes it more engaging and more attractive. One of the things that a lot of people do is they'll put a bright light in front of them,
right,
and it will light their face evenly, and it's kind of flat. It's like talking in a monotone. It doesn't give that much depth and dynamic level to your face when you do that.
Okay, because I have two sort of bright LEDs in front of me on stands, but I also have soft boxes up that are actually one's a little bit in front of me, one's a little bit behind me, that are shining onto the back.
Yep. That sounds like a very good setup. I have two soft boxes there, and I have one overhead to provide a little more definition from up on high. There are lots of videos on YouTube about different ways you can set up your lighting, but a simple 3-point lighting is generally really good for what most people need.
Right. And again, so much easier. I started making videos in 2004, and I bought a lighting kit that was, it was the size of a steamer trunk with, three, it had 5 tripods. Then all the lighting stuff, and this was 500 watt incandescent bulbs that you'd be sweating as soon as you turned it on, and they only lasted for a couple 20 hours, and they were very expensive. And then the 2 tripods with the backdrop stand. This whole thing was like $500 and constant ongoing maintenance, and it was huge, and it was a huge pain to put up and take down. And now these lights I have here, they're on $20 stands that clamp onto my desk. Each one of these was $50, and they're way brighter, and they're LED, 50 watts, and you use very little energy.
Yeah, LED is the only way to go, clearly. And you have a number of really good choices for lighting between $100 and $150. The panels like you suggested, but you can also still get soft boxes within that price range. The soft boxes I have take 5 bulbs. Originally, they had the CCFL, the sort of corkscrew fluorescent tubes in them, which were great at the time because they use a lot less power energy than the incandescent, but they still got hot. And the bigger problem with them is they change brightness over time. When you first turn them on, they were one level, and then slowly they'd warm up, and then it would drift a little bit. Your white colors would change, white levels would change. It was just, it was maddening.
They also hum sometimes.
Sometimes they can hum, exactly. So my solution is I've replaced all those CCFLs with just standard LED light bulbs. And these are ones I get at the big box store for $2 or $3 a piece. They're the brightest I can get. So they're 100 watt equivalent. And the big thing is I get daylight color temperature bulbs, because I think that cooler light looks more professional. I think it gives you a better image. That, the warm light is kind of yellow, which depending on what you're doing, that might be fine. But I think for a professional kind of look, I think that the daylight gives you a much better look.
Okay, gotcha. So before we go on to cameras, you talked about like TV. So how do you think about the framing? Like if I was on stage, I wouldn't want them to see my whole body. And I know you could, some people could do that. Like if, if a yoga teacher obviously doesn't just want to be a talking head, but for you and I we're both at standing desks.
Yep.
I have a camera that has zoom. I could zoom in and you could just, see the whites of my eyes, or I could zoom out. You could see the sides of the room, beyond the blue background. How should I think about that?
So great question. And so again, don't ask me, go watch television. But this is what you're going to see. One of the things that drives me crazy is the number of, Zoom meetings or podcasts or whatever that I've been on, and you see this. Somebody down here got all this space up here, and they're down here talking, which it's not a good look. But what's worse is when they're all the way forward, and so it's framed, so it's just their face and neck in the image. And I was on a call with a psychologist who's done a lot of research in this area. And he made a really good point. He said, you do that, you're violating the audience's space. You're too close. They're going to want to back away from you, and it's not a good reaction to set up with people. I have a number of people I know who that is their go-to look. Fill the phrase, fame, they're being intimate, and all that. And I think it's a mistake. My rule of thumb is you want to show at least from the bottom, the bottom edge of your rib cage up. And you don't want to cut off the top of your head.
Right. So I'm not quite doing that. So I'm noticing I can see your elbows and I can't see mine.
And so to me, the bottom limit is about the belt. So you want the bottom of the image.
If I move backwards a little bit.
So from here, down to about here, I think is about the right framing.
So does this look
so
better?
That's better. And I think if you could be just back a little further, that would be even better.
Okay. So then the limiting factor is the mic.
Right.
So I could move it. I'm not going to do it right now.
No.
Do I still sound okay?
Play around. Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
But I would say from a framing point of view, that looks much better.
Okay.
It looks more natural. And so the psychologist was saying, for every additional proportion of the torso that you show on screen, the higher the engagement goes, the more human you become. Which and it's not just his theory. I mean, they've done studies and this is what they found. So and this is why I want to go to a lav mic, because then I'll be able to step back even further. I can move around more and my sound will be good. I won't have to, I won't be anchored to the microphone as I am now.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I have a couple of lav mics, but they're not very good. They were sort of $50 a pair.
Yep.
So would you get a wireless?
No, I'm a wired guy. Well, first of all, you run it down your shirt, the wire's out of the frame. No one's going to see it. It's not going to look any different wired or wireless. You don't have to worry about charging. You don't, there's a lot of headaches with wireless that you don't have to worry about. Going back to a fundamental technology thing, I don't do Wi-Fi for my connection. I'm on a wired Ethernet connection because you just don't know what interference is going to come in and disrupt your Wi-Fi connection. So wired is better than Wi-Fi if you can possibly do it. And you can get Ethernet cables that are 100, 200 feet long. So I don't care if your router's in the basement.
Right.
You can still run a wire up to your room and have a wired connection.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap.
And they're not expensive. Exactly. One less thing to worry about. And you get more bandwidth, and more bandwidth is higher resolution, better sound quality. I mean, it just all adds up.
Right. So just for my own sake, I don't know that my audience cares about this, but what lav mic should I get? Because I really like. I mean, I would love to not have this thing in frame, and I would love to be able to move around more.
So, I've got the 2 for $50 that I'm working with. I also have an old Sony stereo one that's a bit large and clunky. My approach is I'm going to go with the cheapos until I find that doesn't give me the sound that I want. Obviously Rode, RODE, is one of the vendors who makes great portable microphones and other portable equipment, recording equipment. They're really good. And there's nothing better than Shure, and they've got lav mics. So if I were going to upgrade, I would probably be looking at one of those two.
Gotcha.
And then you've got a bunch of Chinese companies that put out really good stuff at a better price. So, if you're willing to burn a little money just to try something out, Newer is one of them, NEWER, on Amazon. But again, I would start with the minimum viable and use that until you decide that's not what you need.
Very good. All right. So we've talked about sound, microphones. And if you're getting started, just get a USB that plugs right in. You don't have to worry about audio interfaces or soundboards. That's under $100. Lighting, $150.
Right. We've got one point on lighting that we didn't cover.
Okay.
Ring lights. Now, if you don't, for those in the audience who don't know what a ring light is a circular light that's designed so that you could put your camera right in the middle and shoot through it and get a nice even lighting on your face as you record your video. And in general, ring lights are a good idea. However, don't use them the way they're designed. Because again, if you put it right around the camera, then that light's going to be even across your face, and you're not going to get that differential lighting, and it's not going to be as good as it could be. So what I recommend to people is take that ring light and mount it separately off 20, 30 degrees off axis from where the camera is. So you get a little more on one side and a little less on the other side. Not so much that you get deep shadows on the off side, but it'll give you a better quality image.
Gotcha. And if you only have one stand, you can take a piece of paper and cover half of it.
Right. And then the other thing about it is people often buy a ring light that's too small. Because if you think about, getting a 6-8 inch ring light, it's really not a whole lot bigger than a bare bulb. So you're not really getting much of a dispersion advantage of it. So for me, you really want at least a 10-inch ring. 10 to 12 inches is better. And again, you also want to make sure that a daylight color temperature is one of the options. And then the third point about ring lights is there is a class of people who should never use a ring light ever.
Oh, yeah.
You are not in that class, but I am.
Because you wear glasses.
Because I wear glasses. And if you put a ring light out in front, you're going to get these little white Cheerios in your lenses. And I got to tell you, I find that so distracting. You can't unsee it once you start noticing it. And so if you have glasses, you're much better off just going with the two separate lights. And they don't have to be soft boxes. I mean, they could be a good floor lamp or a bright light. Go down to Home Depot, buy one of these. If the light's too harsh, you can just put
and for my listeners, it's basically like a
clamp-on utility light.
Clamp-on utility light. They cost, the big ones are like $7.98 without the bulb.
at the big box, they're now running about $13-14.
Okay.
But
so it shows you when I bought mine.
Yeah. I mean, they, but again, put one of these daylight LED bulbs in there. And this is also good for an auxiliary. If you're trying to fill in someplace where you've got a little shadow and you want to punch up the light, or if you want to put more light on your backdrop.
Right.
They can be very helpful for that.
Okay. So before we get to cameras, one other question around position, which is like, I'm looking into your eyes right now, and I'm not, right? If I was pretending to look into your eyes so that you would think that I'm looking up about 5 inches from your head into my camera. So Peter and I were playing around with this, and he actually got a teleprompter. That he like, do you think that's useful or worth it? Like, is the difference like when I'm looking at you, or
like you set him up so I can knock him down? This is great. Okay, we'll talk more about this in cameras, but the key point is you want to put your camera at eye level or slightly above, because that's naturally how you look at people. I mean, you're not naturally looking down at somebody.
Okay.
Unless they're, if they're seated and you're standing, but that's not a natural conversation. Or you don't look up to somebody, right? For a conversation, you want to be equals and looking eye to eye to each other. And you're right. In order to make it work, you should be looking right at the camera, which is what I'm doing as I'm looking at you.
Okay.
My screen is down there. I've built myself what I call the periscope. It's my own do-it-yourself teleprompter. So what I've actually done is I built myself a full screen teleprompter that fits over my monitor entirely, and then reflects it up, and my camera is behind the plastic where it gets reflected.
So you can see me.
I'm looking straight at you on my screen, and my camera is right there. I'm looking at the camera while I'm looking at you.
Okay. So I know you can buy stuff like this for like $200 for the teleprompter.
They can be expensive. They can use some very fancy materials, and the only reason I did this was because I have a shop and I'm just kind of bent this way, and I know enough about displays and optics to come up with something that's good enough.
Do you think it matters?
One of the things that's important is the mirror that you use to reflect up. You don't want to use a regular domestic mirror, because they're silvered on the back. They have the reflective surface on the back. So the light comes through and hits the back and then comes back out again, and it gets refracted. And so you don't get a really clean image. What you want is a front surfaced mirror. And I got this for free because somebody was throwing out a projection television screen, and I went in and salvaged the mirror out of it. And that's an expensive part. I mean, to buy that would be not prohibitively expensive, but it's expensive. And that's why a lot of the teleprompter gear that you can buy online tends to be very small. They tend to be designed for iPads or little tablets. But the bottom line is they all work, and that's good. And there are ways for you to get your image from your computer onto a tablet in your in a teleprompter. So my answer to all of, long way around the barn is, yes, teleprompter kind of arrangements are awesome. I believe they really make a difference, and I think they really help with engagement. You don't have to have one. You have to learn how to be comfortable to talk at the camera and not look at the other person.
Like I would think that, for me, when I've given, group presentations, so like a Zoom webinar where I'm just talking, then that's probably a better time to be looking at the camera.
Yes.
Whereas if it's a meeting and I actually, or I'm teaching a class and there's 10 people in the class, then it's more important for me to observe, facial expressions, physical reactions,
Yeah, yeah, and that's, if you do a lot of that, that's where a teleprompter kind of arrangement would be really good, because then you can have them in your field of view while you're talking.
All right, cool.
And
All right,
so that can definitely be worth it.
okay.
So,
all right. Next question. It looks like to me like you have a green screen.
I do.
Like that brick wall behind you with a framed picture that says speaker. Oh, it went away. Oh, now you're like in the Bodleian Library, and you have a
bottom third.
A bottom third that says your name and your thing. So what are you using for this? Is this Elgato?
This is so Elgato is a manufacturer that makes wonderful equipment for podcasting, for video, for all kinds of things, and basically turns your computer into a video control room, which is great. By itself, it doesn't do what I'm doing. All right. I'm using a program called OBS Studio.
Okay.
Which is open source. It's free. It is tricky. I mean, it can do a lot of really great stuff, but there is a significant learning curve involved in learning how to make it do stuff like this. I don't have it set up right now for our conversation, but this LED, this display I have over my shoulder is totally virtual. And when I'm doing a slideshow, my PowerPoints show up in here, and then I hit some keys and the PowerPoint fills the screen, and I'll be down in the corner, and I can add myself or take myself away from the PowerPoint screen and back again. And I'm doing that without any Elgato control panels.
Okay.
OBS allows you to set up keyboard macros. And so I have a bunch of keyboard macros that I can use to make things appear and go away.
Gotcha. So what I use, I don't do very much of that at all.
Yep.
Basically, for the podcast and also for presentations. Well, I want to talk to you about that as well, because I have a big problem with showing my slides. But I use Ecamm Live, and I have an A10 Mini.
Yep.
And to some extent, they duplicate each other's capabilities.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. So I'm on camera here. I'm going through Zoom, and the A10 Mini, the Blackmagic A10 Mini is my source.
Right.
And I have a button there that if I press, it gives me desktop.
Yep.
I don't know why it's not doing. I guess
No, that worked. No, it changed to desktop. I saw your desktop when you did that.
Right, because I'm looking at the camera, not
right.
Okay, so from there, I would then have my PowerPoint all keyed up and ready to go.
Yeah.
And then when I do that, people tell me, "Hey, it's blurry."
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So, the only thing I could do is then not use these wonderful capabilities, and then just do screen sharing on Zoom, which is now I got to lean over and press buttons, and it's kind of Like, is there any way around that?
I haven't worked with the A10 Mini, but I don't have that problem with OBS Studio, because this isn't using my webcam. Zoom is using the OBS Studio virtual camera.
Okay.
So when I add, actually, let me, I don't know. I don't think I have anything set up here, but
All right, I'm now seeing you're gone, and it says Health Tech Insider.
Yeah. That's wait a second, that's the wrong one. Hang on. There we go. This is where if I had slides running, you'd see the slides behind me.
Okay, now you're at the bottom left. You're smaller.
Yeah, and so there's room out here. Well, my hand disappears, but there's room out there somewhere. Right. There's room out there for all my PowerPoint content.
And this is very stark and cinematic.
If I need to get out of the way because I have a whole picture, full screen picture or something like that, I can just hide myself.
Gotcha. So this is more for professional speakers, people who do presentation where they really want to wow an audience.
I wouldn't say professional speakers. I think it's people who really want to wow an audience, or who do a lot of presentations that are similar, and that this would augment the content and help keep the audience's attention. Like if I were a salesperson, and I was making sales calls on video, I would have a rig set up like this, so I could call up a video, that I could, make my sales pitch with slides. Because, if you put slides in that little window, they're not going to show up much. It's just for,
well, but
really,
and all
really
of this
content.
All of this just gives the impression of competence.
And it does that as well. Right. And then this is where I'm talking about today. This gives you that edge, right? Next year, certainly the year after, this will be table stakes.
Gotcha.
People will expect something of this quality.
Right. Another question. I can't remember what it is. Oh, the green screen.
Green screen. Yes.
So I assumed when you would, get out hide the virtual background, that I was going to see an actual green screen, because on Zoom we'll do a green screen for you and people's body parts keep disappearing.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. I'm glad you raised that up. Okay. This goes back to Zoom fatigue, or, there's no such thing as Zoom fatigue. There's bad Zoom fatigue. And so are green screens good? Not necessarily. Good green screens are good. Bad green screens, bad virtual screens are awful. And using Zoom and a bunch of the other platforms that allow you to do a virtual background without having to have a green screen behind you. Yeah, I mean, they work, kind of.
But what are you using? Because you don't have an actual green screen.
No, I do. Yeah, it's an actual green screen behind me.
It is. Well, what happened when I saw those books? That was just another.
That's another background.
Oh, can I see your green screen?
Probably.
Okay.
Let me see if I can. What happens if I turn it off? What do we got now?
No, I still see the neat desk with the tech logo on it.
Okay.
It's not that important.
Well, let me go here. Well, there you.
Okay, I can see the edge. It looks like
you can see the edge of it. The green screen has
looks black.
Let's see if that. No, that didn't bring it back. Okay.
So I see a black screen.
So what you see is black is actually green.
Okay.
And you can see over here, you can see the edge of the screen and the clamps holding it in place. But this fabric right here is green.
Okay. Gotcha.
So
now what do you think of my my background? This is my actual background.
That's a real background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just finish on the thing about virtual backgrounds. A bad virtual background can be really distracting.
Okay. Right.
Your hair appears and disappears, and a bunch of stuff like that. And so I recommend against that. It just doesn't look professional. It's fine. It's fun. It's good enough for casual stuff. But if you're trying to be professional, I mean, if this is something you would dress up for, then I wouldn't use one of those, on the fly virtual backgrounds.
Okay.
So for your background, hang on a second. Let me just see if that should stop ringing. Good. So a couple things I like about your background. It's bright. It's well lit. It's a bookshelf. It's got some plants. It sort of makes things a little softer and nice. I would see if I could get rid of some of the wrinkles in the fabric.
You can see the wrinkles?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Okay.
That's all right. But
all right, I get more brads and a hammer.
But couple things that I really like is there's an effect in photography called bokeh. which is where it's depth of field, where you're in focus, but the background isn't. It's sort of blurred out a little bit, which is what I've got going on here.
Right.
Right. And when I think it's especially important when you're going to show a bookshelf, because I don't know about you, but when I'm watching the news and a commentator comes on and they're sitting in front of their bookshelf. Now, obviously the book that they wrote is going to be facing us with a cover and their name on it, but then they've got all those other books and I don't listen to a word they say. I'm busy there trying to read their books and, what do they think's important? What are they reading? And again, major distraction. This picture that I'm using for my backdrop, this isn't the original picture. I took this into Photoshop and I blurred it and blurred it and blurred it down and down and down until you didn't have a chance of reading any of the titles.
Right.
So you're not even tempted to. And again, having that blurred background makes me stand out sharper. It provides a nice contrast, and I think it works really well as a background. Wouldn't do you much good if I hadn't blurred it, because they're all in Spanish. But yeah. But yeah, so that's what I like that about your bookshelf is, I'm not tempted to try to read the titles.
Okay.
If it was much sharper, then that could be a distraction. I think that the key points about a good, about a good background is that it's not cluttered. It's got a context that's relevant to your messaging. And so that it's got something that makes sense with what you're trying to do. No, that one I don't have set up, and I don't have that one set up. Changed cameras recently, so don't have all my different backgrounds queued up yet. But yeah, so uncluttered, makes sense in the context, and it's not a distraction. I think those are the key things. But I think yours works really well. It's okay. It's almost symmetrical. It's not too symmetrical. I mean, some of the ones on TV look so great, but everything is just lockstep. You could just divide it right down the middle and fold it, and it would match up exactly. So I think you want a little unbalance to it, which you've got. Okay, cool. So I'm looking at the time. We're already at past when I promised we'd be done, but I still have more questions. Do you have a few more minutes? Sure. Okay. So let's talk about I can go on. Obviously, I can go on about this stuff for hours. Okay, good. Well, I will fully take advantage of your your generosity or your inability to stop, whichever one that represents. I don't know that there's a difference. So let's talk about cameras, because that's what people think of first. There's the webcam that comes with your laptop. There's your phone camera, which is way better than anything I'd ever owned before. I have a couple of DSLRs they're cheap for DSLRs. They're both in the $600, $700. That's about the opening point for a good DSLR these days. So what do you tell people if they're just starting out and they've just got a laptop, or they've got like a a Logitech 615 or something? We'll start with a laptop. So going back a ways, camera should be eye level or a little bit higher. That's hard with a laptop. It's hard with a laptop. The phone company doesn't send out phone books anymore, so you need to find something else to stack them on, right? And so people take crates and they'll put it up so it's high enough for your laptop camera to be up where it needs to be. But the problem then is you can't see your keyboard. And if you do type on it, your hands are up in the shot, which is not good. You can get these stands, $30, $40, a stand that lifts the base off the desk and then puts it at an angle, and then the screen sticks up above that, so that gets the camera up high enough. And so you can type on the screen and the camera's up there, and that can work. But let me just ask you, you're framed nicely now. How far are you from your camera?
3 feet.
3 feet. If that was attached to your keyboard, would you be able to type on your keyboard?
I would not. I would need a separate keyboard, or I mean, usually I stopped typing on the keyboard because the noise was annoying.
Yep.
So now I just use a pen and pad and
Right.
and hope to God I can remember what I wrote, because my handwriting's not so great. But now, since talking to you, I'm farther away because my camera is attached via a stand to the desk. So I can't move the camera back right now.
Right.
So now I don't have it. Now I can dance and free float, but I can't operate my desk.
Right. So for those with laptops, even though you might have a good camera built in, it might be a crappy camera. That's where I recommend you get an external camera, external webcam. And Logitech is the gold standard for webcams. The one I'm using right now is the C922 Pro.
Okay.
Basically anything in the 9200, 920 series will probably do a really good job for you.
Is that a green box? Because I could see the.
The green box. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a green box.
Okay, so I could see the bricks through it.
It's a virtual box. Good eye. And again, last year, if you could find one, that you'd paid a king's ransom. There was price gouging going on like crazy, but today you can get that, about $100 for a good webcam. Some people will say, okay, what about the Logitech Brio, which is a 4K webcam, 4K being twice, actually works out to almost 4 times the number of pixels as a standard full HD 1080p camera, which is what the 922 is. Brio is 4K, higher resolution. Maybe I should get that because more pixels, better, right? Don't waste your money. I mean, if you're going to be recording videos with it and you have some reason why you need the higher resolution, fine. But no streaming platform that you're going to be using is going to show 1080, is going to show 4K. A lot of them don't even show 1080p. Zoom will often step you down to 720p. So there's no sense in spending the extra money for the 4K Brio. What the image quality you're going to get from the 922 is going to be just as good.
Okay. So, right. So something I discovered when and I have a 920 that I gave to my wife to use for her videos. And then I had, I set up a temporary office and I had 2 615s. They're old, like 10 years old, maybe. And I was amazed at how bad they were and how good they got once I had proper lighting.
Yes. So the bottom line for all webcams is more light is better. Think about the movies or television. Those studios are bright. They're Sahara at noon bright, because the more light you send in the lens, the more signal gets to the imager, and so more light is better. There is a point where it's too much light. In fact, I actually have all these back down a notch or two. I'm not using them at full brightness, but more light is better. And the older cameras can be good enough. You want to make sure that you're running them at their native resolution, so you're not scaling up or down, because that can make it blurrier. And a lot of the older ones have some weird native resolutions, 1142 or something like that by something or other. I mean, it's if they're old enough, they can be a little funky. But it's good enough. Stick with it. but that could be one of the first targets to upgrade, because again, $100 should.
So for somebody who wants to do it professionally, I think, DSLR is kind of the either DSLR or mirrorless.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, mirrorless is the way I would go.
Okay.
And up until the past year or so, you had to take the HDMI output from the camera and run it through a box that could then plug into your USB port. Today, most of the big manufacturers have a feature so you can actually run a HDMI to USB cable directly from the camera to the computer. Some have limitations that the others don't, but for the most part, for this kind of stuff, it's going to be plenty. None of the limitations are going to be a problem for you. The big thing is you want to be able to produce what's called a clean HDMI stream. So when you normally take a photo with your camera, it's got the f-stop and the shutter speed and the color temperature and how many shots you've got left and all kinds of other stuff on the screen.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have a setting where you take all that away, so none of that goes through the computer.
That's why I ended up buying a second camera, because I have this camera was my absolute favorite. It was the Canon SL2, but it doesn't have clean HDMI out, and the only way that I could get it was to turn off autofocus,
right? Which
meant that I was now, stuck in place.
So interesting you say that. So for those who don't know, the reason to step up to DSLR or mirrorless DSLR, the reason to step up to them is they have interchangeable lenses and they have better optics. I mean, you look at the lens on a webcam, it's this tiny little dot. You look at a camera, they've got an inch or two across on the lens. So, it's much better optics, a much better image that you get. And the fact that you can change lenses means that you can get a shorter focal length or a longer one, so that you can get a telephoto or a wide angle. And so you can change the lens to meet the specific needs of your studio. Another thing is that these cameras are better at that thing I was talking about, bokeh. So where you can have the person in focus, but things closer and further away will be out of focus, which can give you a really nice look. Especially if you're using a real and not a virtual backdrop behind you. My inclination is to turn autofocus off. Okay. Because it's one more thing to go wrong. And the chances are good that you're going to be staying in a fairly tight range of distance with the camera. You're probably not going to, you need to play around with the f-stops and the rest of that. But depending on your lighting, you'll probably be able to find a range of focus where you're going to be, and it'll stay in focus. Because the problem is if you go autofocus and some people are demonstrating stuff, they want to hold this up and have it get focused and then put it back down.
If you're doing lots of product videos, you want one of those.
But if it stays focused there, and it doesn't come back to you, then you're a blur, and then you have to go put your hand out here and bring it back slowly to get it catch up to you and all that, and that can be a mess. My preference, and this goes for webcams, goes for digital cameras, it goes for all of them, I prefer to turn everything off. No automatic anything. I mean, one of the things that drives me crazy on Zoom calls and things where people are using their webcam, a lot of times the webcam will have auto exposure turned on. And I was in this one call where the woman was wearing a fairly crimson sweater on the call, which was pretty, but it would flash between crimson and magenta and crimson and magenta back and forth. And it was, again, really distracting. Even if you just have something for whatever reason you hold up a white piece of paper, if you have auto exposure on, it can change your color settings, it can change everything. And then you take the paper away and maybe it resets and maybe it doesn't. And so for me, I turn off auto exposure. I turn off I turn off the autofocus, anything that, let me set up everything the way I want it and lock those controls in, and I'll take my chances with being out of focus briefly. You don't have to hold this up way up there. You can show your product here and it's going to be staying in focus because it's with you.
Very good. Okay. And so do you have a camera that people who don't want to go and like do a lot of research, like
yeah. So, I'm still shopping for buying. Canon has some models that I'm very tempted by. Sony has some good low end models that will do the job. Until the last year or so, there have been concerns about them overheating when used as a webcam, as opposed to just video or snapshots. And then the third one is the Lumix from Panasonic. That one is also on my list. So those are the three brands I would look at first. The thing to remember is you're going to need a battery replacement for any of these cameras. So because you're going to be using it for long periods of time, you want to be able to plug it into AC power. So when you're working out your budget, make sure that you budget to get a battery replacement as well. Right. So you're probably looking at $600 to $700 to get into that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm using a Sony ZV-1 now that doesn't Sony doesn't make a battery replacement. Some third-party company does. And I was all scared about, setting it on fire. The other thing I noticed is that I can't put it on a tripod.
Oh, because of the battery?
Because where the battery door is, and the battery door doesn't close with a wire hanging out of it. So I had to get a special rig to move everything over.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I mean, partly my experimentation is like, I'll buy a thing and then a week later I'll have bought all the other things that I need to make the first thing work.
Right. And that's fairly typical at this point. It's we're a little bit out of the Wild West. I think, the railroads have come through, but you still need to be either self-sufficient or go to a really reputable source like B&H Photo out of New York. They're experts at this. You call them and you tell them what you need and they'll say, okay, here's what you need and here's what here's what will do the job for you. So yeah, I would encourage people who are not quite sure if they want to go that route and not quite sure what they need or how to get it set up. Going to somebody like B&H is going to be a good step to take.
Very good.
So,
all right. So now we're way over the time and there's like 12 more things I want to ask you about. So
we could do this again.
Okay. That'd be great. I also want to know, like, do you teach people this? Do you have a course or a program or a group? Like, I'd rather let this be the, the appetizer and the free sample and let people find you for the rest.
So where is it? Speaker Springboard is my program. And that's the website, speakerspringboard.com. So last year when the pandemic hit, I started holding free hour-long workshops for speakers to help them understand some of these issues and to learn. Some of them were, tech nervous, help them understand the little things they could do to make their presentations better. And in doing those, after a few times, I realized that I had a lot more than would fit in an hour. Go figure. Right. And so I actually developed an online course. It's 10 modules. And it does some of these technical things like microphones and backdrops and cameras and lighting and all that stuff. But it's also technique. Talks about how to structure your presentations differently, how to look at creating your slides for online presentation versus what you would do on stage. Your presentation style, not running around the stage like you would on an in-person event. So it's techniques and it's technology and techniques. It covers the whole thing. But I'm also offering, I'm holding free webinars once a month. Anybody can sign up. The two things is, you need to register for it. And the second thing is you got to show up, because I don't do replays. And I don't do replays because people don't pay attention to replays. Right. The engagement is lower. But the webinar runs about 45 minutes. There's no hard sell in it. I tell you about my program and what it costs and what it could do for you, but there's no hard pitch in it. And after 45 minutes, I take questions and answers, and I will stay until all the questions are answered. So if you want it, the only way to get access to that is to be live. And so that's why I don't do replays.
Okay.
But
so
anybody
people
who wants,
people can find all that at speakerspringboard.com.
Okay. Speakerspringboard.com/demonstration will take you to the registration page.
Okay.
/demonstration. And I have 2 sessions on the 3rd Thursday of every month. One's at 10 o'clock Eastern and one's 2 p.m. Eastern. So there's the early one works for people in Europe. The later one works for people on the West Coast. For my Australian friends, I'm sorry, but we're still working on a way to find something that works for 12 hours apart. But though I have had folks from Australia get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to attend one of these webinars. So, but yeah, it's fun, and we cover some of the same ground that we've talked about here, and a bunch of other stuff. I talk about saber-toothed tigers and sand and a bunch of interesting things. But yeah, that's once a month. That opportunity rolls around.
Okay, awesome. Well, so I'll put all that in the show notes. I'm sorry I didn't get to ask you about wearables. Maybe I can get you back on for a health tech conversation.
Be happy to.
But anyway, Alfred Poor. So I've learned a lot. I hope the audience, and I guess the vidians, because I really want people to watch this on YouTube, because there's a lot of visual stuff here.
There's one other thing I want to mention. In addition to the course, I do offer bespoke training. I mean, some companies may have a specific need for a team. So maybe they have a sales team that's doing a lot more virtual pitches, and they don't need the whole 10-course meal. They just want come in, tell us where we are. Give me the 3 things that we can do that make it a measurable difference in what we're doing, that sort of thing. So I'm available for that kind of work as well. Okay,
great. I want to leave with one final question.
Sure.
Which is, when I get the recording from Zoom of this conversation, I get 2 video options. I get speaker, where whoever is speaking takes up the full screen, and I get gallery, where you can see both of us. As far as I know, I have not picked my nose while you were talking. I probably fidgeted a little bit. What do you recommend in terms of the sharing this recording?
So that's a good question. One of the things is I'm slightly off-centered by nature. So, but also, as you see in the frame, I'm off-center. So depending on how it crops the image in the side-by-side view, it may not look as good to have me cropped. So maybe
so the Zoom will give us both. It'll create a big black bar above and below, so it'll give it to us. It won't crop at all.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if the side-by-side doesn't crop, I would probably go with side-by-side.
Okay.
But I mean, it's not like I was putting up any really detailed slides or things where people needed a close-up to see what I was doing. So I would try side-by-side.
Okay. Will do. That's what I've been doing just because it's been less work. But I was wondering.
Yes. Well, for me, I download separate video and audio tracks and then go into my video editor and put the whole thing together separately. So I have control over what shows in it, but I'm just obsessive that way.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to
That's
do
a
that.
lot of work.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till the times have changed and I can't get away
Right.
with not.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for my podcast, as short as it is, I only do audio just so I don't have to fuss with the video.
Uh-huh.
But
right.
Yeah.
I was going to do audio only, but then one of my podcasts on YouTube like took off, like the algorithm blessed it. And now I'm like, well, maybe this one too. So
there you go.
I literally spent 5 times as much time on the video that almost nobody watches.
Right. Well, that's par for the course.
Okay. Glad to hear it. Alfred Poor, thank you. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing generously so much of your knowledge. People can go to speakerspringboard.com to find out more and to get your training modules and bespoke training. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Again, if you have been listening and you'd like to watch, it's plantyourself.com/497, and the YouTube is embedded right there. I hope this has helped make you a digital audio visual maven and that you get your message across and influence the world and have wonderful impact. And because of that, the world becomes a better, kinder, more generous, more fair, more safe, more loving place. All right, what else is going on? Been playing a lot of Ultimate. It's really fun with the holidays. There have been games in the middle of the day. Been played 3 days in a row. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, and I come home exhausted, and I really, really like it. And in garden news, we took out an entire bed of mugwort. Mugwort is apparently a very cool plant, but it doesn't care if you don't want it to keep growing. It's pretty weedy, and it sends up these rhizome shoots. So I asked the plant's forgiveness, cut it all down, covered it with cardboard, covered it with mulch, and now we have a better view into the garden. And now kind of where that area is, I just have this urge to build a cob oven. So if anybody's listening and you know a lot about earthen building, cob is a mixture. It's not corn cobs. It's a mixture of clay, sand, and chopped up hay, which sort of like adobe, like a very traditional, low-tech, very good building material. It insulates well. It's fairly soundproof. And for the purpose of a cob oven, think of like one of those pizza ovens at the wood-fired pizza place, except this is made a big dome out of clay with fire bricks on the bottom. So if anybody wants to help me, because I really don't know what I'm doing, but I just had this fancy that I would like to have that in my backyard. All right, that's probably more about me than you care to know. So let's get to the thanks. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Filkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious Michelle X, Elsbeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Kelly Cameron, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Bennon, Gila Sert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Val Linneman, Nick Harper, Bandana Charlie, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Koppel, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Sharon Hirschman, Linda Ayad, Holm Hedegaard, Isa Tuzinwa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Marani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Peter W. Evans, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Leenan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bilberry Elf, Marjorie Lewis, Trisha Adams, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Paranganchi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Naik, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, Michael Lushton, Sarah Johnson, Catherine Floyd, for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.